My name is Adam Draper, and we have awesome panelists up here. I run an accelerator called Boost VC. We provide housing, office space, and investment to startups. We invest in 50 companies a year, more or less, and we focus on virtual reality and blockchain-related startups, blockchain being Bitcoin, if you don't know what blockchain is. Yeah, so I will let each person up here, we have very talented people, and make sure to give applause every time someone says their name. So Anne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks Adam, and thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Anne Wootton, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Pop-Up Archive. Are we doing like the quick intro?
Yeah, well, you can do whatever intro. You can do
This is our panel.
The floor is yours. Like, we can't stop you at this point.
You can try. You might regret that.
Oh, wait 1 second. Actually, before that, we can't stop you. I wanted to figure out what the audience was made of. So, okay, if you're an entrepreneur, can you raise your hand? Okay, that's like a third, maybe, of the people. If you're an investor, can you raise your hand? Okay, entrepreneurs, look at those people and go after them. And then, if you're in the other category, can you raise your hand? And I don't know what the other category is. Curiosities? Curiosities, maybe? Okay, so if you're curious about what we all do and what we're talking about, raise your hand. Well, I guess everyone can raise their hand. Otherwise, you're being forced here by... Okay, Anne, now
Cool.
go. Now we know generally what the makeup is.
We were going to ask too, how many people are students or engineers?
Oh, that was the thing.
That was another question we had. Yeah, we're just like grab bagging it.
Okay. So, how about
Cool.
engineers? Let's raise your hand.
Even
Because,
more.
they might want to recruit you. Okay.
All right.
Intro.
So-
Long, short, whatever.
At Pop-Up Archive, we make sound searchable. So we work with spoken word audio specifically and a variety of software, including speech-to-text software, so that we can actually pinpoint words and phrases where they're found in audio. And we work with radio stations, with podcasts, This American Life, NPR, the CBC in Canada, as well as institutional audio collections of all sorts. So that includes the Hoover Institution at Stanford, the New York Public Library, places like that. And we build indexes of sound for those institutions, and then analyze the sound even further to better ascertain what it's about, people, locations, topical information about what would otherwise just be opaque kind of
Am I allowed to
MP3
ask
files.
questions? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, you're leading this panel.
So why? That's a good point. Why did you start this?
So, here's where the long story comes in. I had always fancied myself, growing up to be a journalist one day. When I was, in elementary school, we still actually laid out the newspaper using like tape and scissors and paper. That had changed by the time I was in high school, but by the time I was finishing college, I really felt like I wanted to sort of emerge from my more humanities background and study technology and be able to contribute to media and journalism in a way that would help inform and shape its path forward, as opposed to being just sort of like a freelance print journalist trying to figure out where my next paycheck was going to come from. And so I met my co-founder at the School of Information at Berkeley, where we did our master's degrees. And I had worked on newspapers for a lot of my, college and educational career, and came into contact with radio producers and people working in audio who had absolutely no systems in place whatsoever for organizing or searching or reusing, better monetizing their audio. And so we thought, that would be a good master's thesis, and there are probably some open source tools out there that we could modify, and absolutely not. So then we started a company to do that for them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we all know a little more about that. Dylan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dylan Field. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Figma. And basically, designers are at the center of everything these days. They're working with engineers, with marketing, with product management, with executives, with other designers. And their tools, despite all this collaboration, are still completely offline. So what Figma is we're building a collaborative interface design tool. Yeah.
And how'd you come up with the idea?
So it was...
Or what ties you to this idea?
Yeah, it wasn't as direct as you read, I'd say. What we did was, I've always believed that all tools should be online and collaborative. And so it was definitely, I was working on a design team at Flipboard, for example, and it was very painful for me to be working in offline tools that were hard to use and very complex. So I had that problem in my brain. I went back to school, and my TA was at the same time exploring a new technology called WebGL. I don't know if anyone's heard of WebGL in the room, but basically what it does is it lets you use your GPU on your computer in your browser. And the stuff that he was doing with it was amazing. He was making it so you could take all the photo effects, for example, of something like Lightroom, and be able to just do that for any image in a web browser. And I looked at that and was like, man, there's got to be something here that we could build. So we were very generally interested in the field of creative tools. And with the support of the Thiel Fellowship, I dropped out of Brown. He actually graduated. And we started exploring. We first focused on computational photography. We kind of moved from there to photo editing. And then from there, we moved to design tools. And this, basically, like the reason we did that in that order was we sort of realized at some point with the computational photography and photo editing tools that it felt like we were making it easier for people to make memes. And it was very hard to look at ourselves in the mirror every morning and be like, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And
I don't know,
when
I love memes.
I know, memes are great, but
and GIFs.
there's a lot of ways to make memes.
Is
and,
it GIF or GIF?
I'm not going to weigh in on the
GIF.
debate. That is a sacred debate, you know. But with design, it was, the world.
How long have you been doing it?
It's been since August 2012 overall, and on this track since about May 2013.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it took us a long time. We just launched in late December. And yeah, I've been going at it for a while now.
Great. Good. Take it away.
Cool. I'm not sure if my mic's working. Is it?
Yeah.
It is. Great.
Yeah, Pelu.
Great. So actually, I'm actually really impressed, but I think this panel is tied between Stanford and Brown right now. Stanley and I from
where'd you go to school?
Stanford.
I went to Brown.
Those two are
Brown.
from Brown.
What?
What
I actually-
about yourself? Were you?
I went to UCLA, so
We are now tied. Okay.
I'm the oddball here.
It's okay. They got us on our both server right sides.
Yeah.
I'm like the referee. I get it.
Exactly.
Fight.
Except you have a vendetta in Stanford, so I'm kind of worried now. No, wow, first panel that's not dominated by Stanford grads. Yes. So what does Augmedix do, and why did I start it? I guess I'll start by, audience polls are a thing now. So how many here have been to the doctor in the past year? Raise your hand. And how many of you, in your experience, keep your hands up, come on, yeah. Exercise.
Oh, no.
How many of you have actually, during that visit, felt like your doctor spent almost as much time on the computer as they did looking at you? Keep your hands up. So roughly, between half and 2/3. That's the problem that Augmedix is going out to fix. We're looking to rehumanize healthcare by eliminating the time that doctors spend on a computer. We do this by connecting physicians to a remote assistant using this device that you guys may have heard of called Google Glass. No, it is not in fact dead. It's actually focused on enterprise applications like ours. And we've been able to just profoundly change how healthcare is delivered. We save the average physician 2.5 to 3 hours per day. And the average visit, we increased the patient-facing time from around 6 minutes to around 12 minutes. So that's our company's mission. My background, I was actually an engineer at Stanford. I was a huge medical device guy and went through actually the Stanford Medical School. Was working in clinics and realized that the problems in healthcare today really aren't ones that can be fixed by another toy or stent or needle or catheter, but were really fundamental to the healthcare delivery system. And so I did a dramatic 180, went from getting ready to become a very well-paid surgeon to diving deep into digital health and primary care. And that was 2012, and it's 2016 now. We're just doing incredibly well.
That's great.
Cool. Hey guys, I'm Stanley. I'm the co-founder of DoorDash.
So we are a on-demand delivery service for local merchants. Right now, we're still focused primarily on food delivery, so we allow customers to order from the best restaurants in their cities and have it delivered under 45 minutes. So we started about 2.5 years ago at Stanford, and since then, it's just been this incredible journey for us. We're now in over 23 cities, including 2 Canadian cities we launched recently, and we hope to take DoorDash to even more cities around the world, and hopefully beyond food one day as well.
And why did you go into this field of on-demand food, other than 2 a.m. burritos are awesome?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny story. Actually, we had no intention of ever going into the food business at all, right? It wasn't one of those ideas where we were hungry at 2 a.m. and we wanted something else other than pizza. We actually started it because me and my co-founders and I, we were all really passionate about this local business space, right? Helping local businesses, local commerce. And, back then we just thought, there could be some opportunities here to build technology to help these local businesses, improve, become more efficient, right? And so we just spent a lot of time just during just as a side project, talking to, small business owners in the area, right, in Palo Alto, Mountain View, Redwood City, just all over the Bay Area, just having conversations with them, and that's really where this idea of delivery first came up, right? We started talking to a lot of these business owners. They kept bringing up this challenge around delivery, right? They all saw delivery as this great opportunity to expand their reach, right? Expand their business, right? Instead of just being confined to, customers who live, 2 blocks around you. With delivery, everyone in your city could access your goods, right? And these weren't just restaurants, right? In fact, most of them were just local retailers, boutique shops, mom and pop shops, right? You name it, and of course restaurants too. So that's really where the spark came from, right? Could we actually use technology to build out a local delivery platform for these merchants, right? Where, we would allow these merchants to offer delivery to their customers, but we will take care of the logistics and software and the overhead ourselves. And that's how we got started. And we decided let's just pick one vertical to begin with. Let's just try out food, right? It's to see if we can get anything going there. And now we are 2.5 years into the food delivery experiment.
Well, you call it an experiment, and I feel that it's very, very true, especially until you're 20 years old and you're 50 years old and you're IBM. But and it's a lot of little made-up experiments. What do you guys, and I'll open it up to everyone, what do you guys think makes a good entrepreneur, if you consider yourselves good ones? Because you're here, you probably are an awesome entrepreneur. Just if you, and I can dub up some of it, but
I can jump in on that one.
Jump in.
And this builds off of a little bit of Dylan's story of how they came to the design software that they're working on now. We similarly, I think you have to be, relentlessly willing to try new things, but also balance that with a certain amount of focus and dedication to the task at hand, because otherwise you're just starting something new every week and have a bunch of failed experiments and no successes. With Pop-Up Archive, we came from this place of wanting to, help bring media into the 21st century and help journalists do their jobs better. And the reason that archive is even in the name of our company, which, frankly, may be a disservice to us in some ways, but we're okay with that for now, is because, I had worked at Brown on a project when I was helping edit the newspaper there to digitize the 150-year, paper archive of the Brown Daily Herald.
Huh.
And so we saw, the same excitement kind of fueled us moving into or starting to work with audio and radio producers. That had excited me about that, and the idea that technology, whether it's OCR turning paper into searchable text, or speech to text, taking audio and speech and turning that into words that you can search, just opens up these enormous opportunities for accessing all kinds of information, historic information, and otherwise. While we continue to do that and it generates a fair amount of revenue for the business on a day-to-day basis, what we've been putting much more energy into recently, much more is probably not fair to say, but a good amount of energy into, has been a series of experiments that are ultimately developing a product called Audio Search. It's audio, SEIR.ch if you want to check it out. But it's basically a podcast and digital radio search and intelligence service. And so we're using the same core technology that we developed for Pop-Up Archive, but applying it to this medium and really industry that has been around for a while, but it has kind of slowly and steadily continued to grow as radio, frankly, shifts from broadcast to digital, fundamentally. And audio search for us from the beginning was a series of experiments. It was, okay, if you add transcripts to spoken word, to radio, does it improve, does it help, with search engine optimization? Does it help people find spoken word when they're typing into a Google search bar that they otherwise would never come across? Okay, if we're to do that, and if we're to, try to cluster these different podcasts and radio shows in different ways, how could we better recommend them to people, since that's not really happening? And the distribution platforms are, sort of developing a pace with the kind of plumbing and piping that we're working on. As we kind of try different things with audio search, but it's
So iteration.
looking around and seeing what the opportunities are, what you want to wake up in the morning doing, because many investors said to us also, this is great, you should do it for financial, quarterly earnings calls, you should do it for conference calls, you should do it for sales call centers, and I was like, yeah, I'm not that person, I don't want to do that. So that being said, radio is going to be digital increasingly, and that there are all kinds of risks there and questions of timing, but those are risks and questions that I'm much more excited about taking on.
Than financial earnings calls.
And yeah, and back to the kind of gist of your question, coming at that with that sort of simultaneous focus and dedication, but also willingness to experiment and see where opportunities are and what you can bring to bear that will work.
Cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and fully agree on the concept of seeing where opportunities are. I think the thing that I have been most shocked about over the past 3 years starting Augmedix has been how many different ways things can pop up and how important it is to actually constantly be thinking about what the next thing that would be that goes wrong. And so I think I spend probably an hour or two every single day.
We've only got 5% battery left.
I think it's an hour or two every day.
What did he say?
Yeah, wow. I spend probably an hour or two every day just focusing on things that are working just fine right now, but that I just have this paranoia and feeling are going to break over the next couple months. And most of my time is spent avoiding fires, and I think that if you're an entrepreneur and you realize you're spending most of your time fighting fires, that's expected. But if you aren't able to do both that and kind of keep your head above the water, that's going to be really, I think that's what's really made the difference. And what I've seen has made the difference between entrepreneurs who really succeed and are able to stay ahead of the market and ones who kind of get lost in their journey.
Yeah, I think that fear is, you always wake up afraid. Actually, James Bashara, the CEO of Tilt, do you guys know Tilt? It's like a crowdfunding platform. He's awesome. But what he said to my group once was, starting a company, it's simple, but it's not easy. So it's the concept of it, explaining, I'm going to start a company is very simple, or I'm going to bring this concept to millions of people. And that's sort of what I always think about when I'm telling my team something. I'm like, oh man, I need to break this up into 40 other things that all the tasks that everyone needs to accomplish, and then, yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. Anything else? Anyone else have anything else to add?
I think this idea of just running experiments, I think, has been at least really important or really helpful for me when I started DoorDash. And and like I never viewed DoorDash as a startup early on, right? It was just like, hey, let's just run this experiment with to see, is there demand for delivery, right? Like, I think the way we approached it is, instead of, hey, let's spend 6 months building this really complicated, logistics software because we wanted to build out a delivery network, why don't we just try to break this idea down into a couple of hypotheses, right? And just test these individual hypotheses first. And only once we validated these hypotheses, then, okay, let's go ahead and work on it, right? So for us, the first hypothesis we wanted to test was, is there even demand for delivery, right? So if consumers don't even want delivery, like there's no point of building this out, trying to convince merchants to adopt it. So for us, we decided, okay, we want to test this idea out. Why don't we just spend like an afternoon hacking together a super simple landing page, right? So we went ahead, we registered a domain name. It wasn't even called DoorDash back then. We registered PaloAltoDelivery.com. So that was the original name of DoorDash. Actually, if you type it in today, it redirects to DoorDash. And all that landing page had was, we curated a bunch of menus in Palo Alto and made it into PDFs so people can click on it. And we had a phone number at the bottom. And all it said was, hey, if you want to order food delivery from these restaurants, just call this phone number, right? And basically, when you call that number, it basically went to me, and I'll pick up. And the idea wasn't, and it took like maybe 2 hours to build the site. I mean, really, like the whole point was we just want to test demand, right? Like, we were thinking, okay, we put this site up. If people started calling my phone, then we know, okay, people want this. And I was planning on just picking up the phone and saying, oh, this is a fake service, right? But I think the funny thing, though, is we put up the site, and then we went off to eat dinner or something, and then literally 45 minutes in, my phone rang. It's like someone somehow discovered PaloAltoDelivery.com. I have no idea how the person found out, but picked up and said, hey, is this Palo Alto Delivery? Like, I saw your site, I want to order food. And in that moment, we were thinking, it's probably not a good thing to say this is a fake service, right? Like, why don't we just play along and say, okay, you know what? Sure, we'll do the delivery for you. What do you want? He wanted pad thai from Siam Royale. And so we said, okay, we'll do it. And then immediately after that, we called up Siam Royale and placed a takeout order. We got in our cars, drove to the restaurant, picked up the food, and then drove to this guy's house. And that was our first ever order, right? We went from idea to our first customer in under 2 hours, and that was really, and since then we've delivered food every single day after that. And I think it's sort of just, mindset we have, like this, just being scrappy, just run. If we have an idea, just run an experiment, right? Don't wait like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months to launch this product. Just get it out. What's like the simplest way to prove out this idea, and just try to hack together that prototype.
It's so funny, the way you describe it, you make it sound more science than like art or like passion almost. And like I always, when we're reviewing entrepreneurs, you always want to know that they're committed to the project because of like why they're passionate about it. It's just really interesting to hear it stated in that way, which is also, it's very true.
And I think you need both, because if there are people out there who are thinking about starting their own companies, like there hopefully is so much passion and personality and emotion in a lot of what you end up doing and the decisions you have to make and what to kill and what to save. And so we found, we have, like a spreadsheet of our hypotheses at any given moment, right? And like what the experiment is and what the deciding factor in whether or not we take action on that will be. And it's so much easier to poke holes in those hypotheses when they're not like ideas that someone has just like said at a meeting, and then they take it really personally when you're like, well, actually, because instead you say, I'm not sure that this hypothesis is completely sound.
I like the what to kill, what to save concept.
It
sounds like when you're a founder of a company, it's just like there's a row of things and you're just pointing a gun at different. You're like, no, not you today. Yeah, you're done. And yeah.
Except that they're like your family
But,
members.
yeah,
and so it's like you
you're out.
you feel a lot about this.
You are
yeah.
the weakest link.
Yeah.
I got this question. Did you charge for the first delivery?
Yeah, so we had a Square account, and so my co-founder interned at Square, so he had a ton of Square readers lying around, so we just charged through Square.
How much did you charge? You charged him for the meal?
Yeah.
How much did you charge on top of the meal also?
Yeah,
like?
and then we wrote on the site $6 delivery fee. So we just
So you already had your business model. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Got it. Okay.
That's
completely.
amazing.
That's a great.
It's funny, like for the short-term nature of that. I mean, you already did the research, of course. It sounds like by talking to all the businesses, but it's so the opposite end of sort of the approach that we took. Because for us, it was, we were doing all this research in parallel, but then we went and we're like, okay, let's go build this thing. It's going to take a really long time. And, it's at least 6 to maybe 8 months before internally we were dogfooding it. And I remember like giving it to our designer, and she was like, are you serious? Like, this thing is so buggy right now. And then we made it better and better and better, but it took quite a long time to even get to the first point where we could put it in front of customers. So I think you can take more of a long-term approach as well as that really short-term approach. There isn't really a right path. It's, there's a lot of different approaches to it.
You need to know when your like D-Day is though. Like
That's right. You need to make sure that you're
like the
moving
concept of
towards
going stealth. I don't like the concept of being like a stealth startup because it's sort of like it means you're not talking to customers that entire time.
Well, it depends on what your definition is. Like we were stealth, but we talked to customers the entire time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I
we just didn't want to get distracted by marketing and PR and all that stuff.
Yeah. While developing hype.
Yeah. We didn't want to do that. We just wanted to like work.
Do you guys, onto a slightly different topic, do you guys have like any stories from the early days of I mean, it sounds like each of you has been working on your projects or your companies for what, 2 years, 3 years? Three? Three?
Yeah.
Three?
Roughly.
Yep.
What?
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, we're all three. I was 3.5. I'm 3.5 years old like today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell one story, which is actually most recent. I just told someone when we were eating. But I was just thinking that, do you guys have any funny stories? Which yours was definitely funny. From the beginning days, okay, we've done 7 sessions at Boost VC, and I wanted to go to CES this year because there's a bunch of virtual reality stuff. We do VR, and so I want a room though, and I don't want to pay for a room, and it's all booked up because I'm calling like a week before the start date happens, and so I call my dad because he's speaking at something. And he says, oh, I'm leaving before then. You're not going to be able to get a room for me. And then I call one of our companies, and I call this company Twindom. And I say, and I'm like, hey, it was my first call. And Twindom, it's a group of 3. They do this 3D scanning thing. And I was like, hey, can I stay with you? Like, do you have a cot? I can sleep on the floor. They were like, yeah, definitely. No, that'd be great. I'd love to see you. We could catch up. So I show up, and it's after a full day of CES. And I show up to this like hotel building. And they bring me into one room, and they say, "Oh, this is where Will, David, and I are sleeping." And then they take me across to the other side of the room, and he goes, "Oh, you're going to be sleeping with Judy." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm married also," and I'm like, "Who's Judy?" And he's like, "My mom." And I was like, yeah, no, this is the type of person I want to back. I want to back the guy who's going to Vegas CES with his mom. And so I was just wondering if you guys had any like good-ish stories in the realm of like early stage funny. It only would happen to a startup type stories.
So we actually ended up proving out our business model and getting our first customer without actually having technology. So we were on the mission to prove this concept that a remote assistant could help a physician write his note. And all sorts of problems with this from investors. Most prominently was, well, there's no chance, snowball's chance in, where that, I don't know what the censorship here. Very
Very strict.
Very slim
streaming.
chance
Very
that
true. We can search the audio now. So.
very slim chance that you'll actually be able to get patients to be okay with this. I mean, they're going to be very sensitive. And even if you do that, we don't believe that you're going to be able to get doctors to be okay with this. And even if you get both of them to be okay with your technology, we don't believe you're going to save them any time. So basically, we don't believe anything you say, and we think you should just stay in medical school. And so we didn't have Google Glass. We didn't have any engineers. It was me and my co-founder from the GSB. And we had to figure out how we were going to prove this business model to convince people to even talk to us. And so we just went on. We performed probably the most kind of back-of-the-envelope proof of concept that I've heard of. And really, it was this. We tried to get a Google Glass unit. No one had one. It was 2012. Just they didn't exist.
Yeah.
Google employees had them, and that was about it. And so we found this 13-year-old named Ethan, who was at the time a middle schooler in a school in San Francisco, and he had actually 3D printed a Google Glass unit to just like wear on uni and gauge reactions as like a middle school project. And we found this video on like YouTube, and we're like, commented or whatever, it was like, hey, like, we're like this like MBA and medical student at Stanford. Can we like meet you? His mom came with him, of course, so another mom story. But but we actually ended up borrowing his Google Glass unit, which was perfectly sized because it was 3D printed for a 13-year-old's head. But we put it on one of our doctors, who was just a friend of ours we had been talking to, and had him just go see his patients. And just to show that this technology would be accepted. And the patients were all like, what's that? Well, it's this recording device. I'm using it to connect to my blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, sure. And so we just ran this test for like 3 days, collected around 70 patients worth of data. We had one patient turn it down, and so we said, our patient acceptance rate is now 98.5%. And we used that data, and we just never ran the trial again. And then the next question was, well, we don't believe that, okay, so you showed doctors are okay with it, we showed patients are okay with it, we don't believe it's going to work. And so we were like, well, crap, like we can't like just build a streaming platform from nothing. And so we thought about it for a little bit. We still had this Google Glass unit that was 3D printed, and we decided, hey, listen, we're just going to use a phone call. So we just took a phone, put it in the doctor's pocket, had it calling me, had my kind of Apple headset plugged in, and I just like wrote his note for him with the patient signing consent and everything else. And that was another week gone by. And after that week went by, we said, hey, yeah, listen, like, with a unnamed individual writing the physician's note for him, we saved an average of 2 hours per day. And those were the 2 data points that we had to collect. We collected them in 2 weeks. When our kind of angel investors, seed investors talked to their friends and kind of did their own studies, they found the same results. But that was actually how we proved the business model that has since expanded Augmedix to some of the nation's largest healthcare systems. And what's crazy is that the time savings have been right around 2.5 hours. And the patient acceptance has been like rock solid at 98.5%. So somehow this, we have sample sizes of like hundreds of thousands of patients now, and like never changed. None of our metrics have ever changed, and our kind of validation has been exactly identical
Oh my
to
God.
when we first
That's
started.
crazy.
So yeah.
Wait, so 3 years later,
Yeah.
Ethan's 16. Is he interning yet?
He actually continues to be an employee. If you actually Google Augmedix.com or go to our Twitter account at Augmedix, you'll see a lot of our videos in our press and our media, and he has done most of it for us.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
The 13-year-old?
16-year-old.
16 now. He's 16 now. So
it's 3 years ago.
yeah. So he'll actually be applying to college next year.
Okay.
And so yeah.
Yeah. So you can't wait until you can hire him. You're just waiting
Yeah.
for it.
He definitely hasn't been doing work for us since then. Yeah. Most of our press and most of our media, most of our videos have actually been directed, produced, etc. by him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, those are good stories.
Yeah.
That's a good story. Do you guys have anything else? Any other just random tidbits of startup information?
I don't know. There's the early days, like the Palo Alto delivery days, was pretty insane for us. I mean, it was just, I guess we were just really surprised, just like the use cases, right? Like, we assume like the only people that would order food is, you're probably like hungry and you just want to like order like a meal for yourself, right? But it turns out, like people order all sorts of stuff for, use cases you've never thought of. Like I remember one time we got a phone call from a dorm on campus, and they basically wanted to order $700 worth of cheesecake from Cheesecake Factory, and apparently they were throwing like a slumber party that night. And they decided to just want to order like $700 worth of cheesecake, and they wanted to have it delivered in under 45 minutes.
For $6.
Yeah, for $6. So we decided, okay, we're just gonna drive to Cheesecake Factory, put in this order, and we just ended up carrying like 6 bags of cheesecake and deliver it to this dorm.
Oh, that's awesome.
And and like we have no idea. We wouldn't have ever known. Like it turns out like people order like this ridiculous amounts.
Yeah.
And there's also like situations where it's been like really touching for us, right? Like I remember one time one of our drivers. This was actually once we became DoorDash. One of our drivers, but still the early days. So one of our drivers delivered to the Stanford hospital. And afterwards, the driver messaged us and said, "Hey, like, guess what just happened? Like, there was a mom who just gave birth to a child, and she decided that her first meal, she didn't want the hospital food and wanted DoorDash, right? And for us, that was like, wow, like this is awesome, right? Like people, if it wasn't for DoorDash, she wouldn't have had such an enjoyable meal right after birth. And we decided afterwards, after the evening was over, the entire office, well, it was like 4 of us, like we all decided to go visit and the hospital and surprised her with like, balloons and like gifts for her, and bought her a box of chocolate and said, "Thank you for ordering your first meal from us." And she was really, really touched.
Oh, wow. That's a good story. That's awesome. Okay, well, that is just a great story. I like that a lot. Okay, so I'm going to make an assumption that you guys didn't build the company yourselves. So that is an assumption I'm making. And in order to find your co-founders, if you have co-founders or first employees, why don't we just discuss co-founders and just if you had them, like how you found them. How about that? Does that sound good? Do you have a co-founder?
I do, and I'll go first because this will be quick. I don't think I would have started this company if I had set out to do it by myself and been on a hunt for a co-founder. I met Bailey as my co-founder in grad school, and we were able to kind of prove out the fact that we worked well together because we worked together in school, and then, didn't even know that we were going to start a company until like the very final weeks of our master's program and have really like just every step of the way felt this out together. I remember one of the first like pieces of press that was ever written about us after we'd like won a couple of competitions at Berkeley, and then we got a big grant from the Knight Foundation, which gave us a really crucial runway early on when we were still figuring out so much, especially having not come into it intentionally. Like, here's, even if we didn't have a business plan, like, here's ideas around business models, ideas around funding, ideas around the angel investors we want to go after. Like, we weren't even sure if it should be for-profit or non-profit at first. And we are exact inverse. We learned this at an offsite recently. Myers-Briggs personality types. Like we're the exact opposite of each other. And so I think that, I should just stop there because it just works really well. And we did like a co-founder workshop at one point around communication, and we're encouraged by one of our investors to do it, and thought like, well, we get along pretty well. Like we don't fight that much, and we're encouraged to go particularly for that reason, because if there's one thing I've learned in running the company and managing people and hiring and having a team, it's that you can always work more on communication, and it's not something that you just like check off like a box that you're done with.
Yeah.
So we've benefited from stuff like that over time, but yeah, I got lucky in grad school.
That's cool. But how'd you meet your co-founder?
Well, he was my TA at Brown.
Oh yeah, you said
and
that.
And this is
So
the part where
school is a good place to find
it is, definitely. This is the part where I just started gushing. well, actually, it's really funny. We're also exact opposites. We haven't taken Myers-Briggs or anything like that, but just personality-wise, in every way, we are opposites. And he was always the single most intelligent person in the room, and that's still true today.
Does he think so?
No, he's totally modest about it. And that's part of why he's so awesome. And I would not have taken the Thiel Fellowship. I would not have started Figma if it wasn't to be able to work with him. And yeah, I mean, he just continually impresses me. And like, it's pretty cool, like in any relationship, I think, if you're constantly surprised by the other person. You know, the first weekend that we were working on Figma, we both talked, and we're like, you know, this is gonna be like a long-term thing we're building. You know, this is gonna be hard. Maybe we should take like 1 day a week and not work on it. Just 1 day, try to have some balance. And we talked about this and we both agreed to it. And and we decided that it would be Saturday, and the first Saturday came around. And I said, okay, Evan, like I'm gonna go to San Francisco today. We were living in Palo Alto at the time. And I'm gonna hang out with some friends and just kind of explore the city a little bit. What are you up to today? You wanna come? And he's like, I'm busy. And I said, well, you're on your computer. Like I thought we were gonna not work today. You know, like we're gonna have this balance thing. And he's like, I'm not working on Figma. I'm building my programming language. And you know, he's been working on that for 3 years now, and it's like out too. You know, and so he's just like mad genius level, amazing dude.
That's cool.
Sorry, I told you to gush.
No, great.
Yeah, I think kind of a trend that's coming up is really finding a co-founder who's not like your identical twin. Incredibly important, and I think the thing that my co-founder Ian was a medical device guy like me, went through Stanford, really passionate about entrepreneurship, was actually in the business school when I was in the medical school, and so we actually share a lot in common. But personality-wise, we're pretty similar too. But I think one of the really important things that has been brought up and that really made us impressed with each other was our ability to disagree well. And it's honestly, it's because I feel like if you spend your first 9 months with a co-founder and you guys agree on everything, and then you don't know how you're going to react to each other when you disagree on something for the first time, that's a huge risk you're taking. But we were on the same project. We were both medical device guys. We were working on a really kind of straightforward medical device as part of the Stanford biodesign program. But we disagreed on plenty of things. And one of the things that most impressed us about the other person was really like we were able to disagree. We were able to voice our opinions. We were open to being heard and changing our opinions based upon the other individual. And it was something that I think both of us were like, wow, like this is actually really rare that you have somebody who you can work with, disagree with, and like still actually figure out a resolution that actually you both end up agreeing is the right one. And I think that was one of the things that I think made us realize that we were a really good fit together in terms of starting a company, because you're going to have lots of disagreements no matter what you do. And if you aren't able to resolve them, it's going to be tough. So I think that was one of the things that I just really remember from even the school days. I guess we met in school also.
Yeah, same here. I met both my co-founders, Andy and Tony at Stanford. So Andy and I were actually the same freshman dorm. So we were friends first. And for 2 years before we actually decided to do DoorDash. And I think we got lucky that the three of us all brought very unique skill sets that didn't really overlap, right? Like, so we naturally had clear divisions of responsibilities, right? Like Andy was really good at the engineering side. I was focused more on product and design. And Tony was focused more on like the ops, business, sales side of things, right? And since we were doing DoorDash, like an delivery service, right, where the physical side of things, the ops side of things was just as important as the technology, the product, engineering side. So I think we just got really lucky that we all met and it was a good fit.
That's great. Yeah, so at Boost VC we've invested in 135 companies now, and we broke down solo founders versus people who have more than one founder. And so solo founders, we've had 28% of our solo founders give up. and only 15% of anyone who has a co-founder. So it's like, and what we found is mostly it's because they get lonely, like they're coding in their basement, they have no one to challenge their ideas, it's not like exciting to them.
I think there's something more to that too.
Yeah.
It's like when you're going through, you're building something, anything, you just have these like intense highs and intense lows.
Yeah.
And it's really nice if they're offset by someone else's intense highs and lows. So that way it's kind of like gets this median filter instead, you know?
Oh yeah, no,
At least for me.
Or for us, it's like Bailey and, which is great. It's great.
That's another way.
She's my rock. Yeah.
good. Okay, so there's a if you want to text in a question, it used to be up there, but ran out of batteries. So we're here. Wait, it just died on me. Okay, no, it's good. But if you do want to text in a question, we have a couple questions up here. But if you want to text in another question, 650-308-8522. I will say it one more time. What? Oh, okay. It's written on your brochure, if you have a brochure. But 650-308-8522. Okay. So here, I'll read one of these. This is sort of a common theme that we always get asked about is so fundraising. It's under, I would say, the topic of fundraising. But the question is, how is it working with investors as a first-time entrepreneur? Oh, well, here. Please share the biggest challenge in looking for the right investor. Let's start with that one, and then we'll go to the other. Anyone?
Sure, yeah. I think I will say very rapid learning was that investors are not looking for the same things that you would be looking for as a founder. As much as you feel like you know what you need to have your company succeed, it's really important to understand what it is the people you're speaking with are looking for, and to really make sure you listen to their concerns. And a lot of it's going to be about risk mitigation. A lot of it's going to be about around validation and roadmap. What your exit looks like. Something we got asked and kind of we brushed off and scoffed at because it was like, well, of course our exit's going to be enormous. I mean, think of the idea, think of the potential. And they're like, yeah, but like, what does that look like? How do you get there? And so you don't need a fantastic, like, quarter by quarter picture of what your roadmap is from now until 2025, but you do need to have a general understanding and like be able to convince them like this is where we want to go, this is the trajectory we want to follow. And so I think in terms of we did the exercise pretty early on in our company's life, and I think that honestly it made it really easy because we were able to look for investors who kind of saw that, would ask questions about it, would challenge it, but generally would end up emerging aligned with not just the next round, but the round after that and the one after that. And so I think making sure that they're aligned in terms of long-term vision was really, really important and really helpful. And we actually ended up keeping, I think, we raised the seed round, and we actually ended up keeping the next 2 rounds internal. And it was fantastic, and it was really because, we
must
were...
be crushing
it.
He's like, yeah.
Oh, no, we're good.
Honestly, I think it was a fantastic show of support, and we have an incredible board and incredible investors, and I really do credit it to just them understanding, not just like, oh, we're a remote documentation service or we're a delivery service, but really being like, okay, where is their mind at, where is their vision, and can we be aligned with that, not just over the next year, but over the next few years. And so, being clear about that, maybe not the first meeting when you're pitching them, but like meeting 2 or 3.
What makes a good investor for you guys? Do you all of you have investors, by the way? I'm assuming you all do, but
yeah. I mean, it's almost like you're going to hire another co-founder. That's one way to look at, what investors take on, assuming that you have the luxury of figuring out, of deciding that. So, for example, the 2 board members that we have, Danny Reimer and John Lilly, I think that bring extremely complementary skill sets to our company. And I talk with both of them on a regular basis. And yeah, about alignment, like I completely agree on that. There's a lot of investors that we talked with and was clearly not a fit, even if they were interested, because they weren't aligned with sort of the way we want to build a business. You don't always say that too. Like sometimes you just have a gut feel, and you have to listen to your gut on that.
No, that completely makes sense. And were any of your fundraisers a struggle? Did any of you have trouble?
I feel like I don't know. I feel like if your fundraise isn't the struggle, then I don't know. Like it's like maybe you aren't trying hard enough to find. Like I feel like if
Maybe you're not raising enough. Yeah.
No. It's not, you aren't. Your filters aren't stringent enough because I think the founder and board fit is just so important in terms of just sanity's sake.
Yeah.
That really having really tight filters and not like I just the average startup. I feel like the board isn't as good as it could be if the founders were more obsessive.
And what kind of value do you think investors add?
Well, the right investors add a ton of value.
Yeah, but
like some investors add just cash.
Yeah.
But this you're an investor.
So I'm
just preaching to the choir, but but the right investors will be able to add their networks. They'll be able to help you recruit and attract talent to your company. They'll be able to help with partnerships, deals.
Yeah.
Be able to help you think through strategic issues. If they're founders, ex-founders, they might be able to tell you war stories about management. There's so many different dimensions a right investor can be helpful with.
Yeah, no, I wanted someone to say that because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs always think that like an investor is just giving you money because you think you need just money. And I always feel that it's much more, obviously I'm an investor, so I'm trying to argue for the use case of me. But
Again, preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Right, but it also depends. Like Dylan said, an investor can add any number of things, whether it's like make your company more attractive for hiring purposes, partnerships, deals, strategy, and only you and your co-founder maybe know what that combination of things is that your company needs, or what other investors you already have on board who you then want to kind of balance out or complement. Our fundraising, we raised a seed round, and it was like surprisingly less of a struggle than I thought it would be, but it was only because I'd heard so many like absolutely just horrible, shocking stories about 6-9 month beyond, seed round raises where you're just, I sort of made some ground rules for myself about what I would be willing to do and not willing to do, and that was really helpful. And then also something that you said, like that gut feeling thing, it sounds really obvious, but when you've never fundraised before, it's very easy to walk into meetings and to get, overwhelmed or to be asked questions that derail you or that make, you want to have the answers and you want to be, on top of it, whatever that means, and you sort of like miss the gut check part completely because you're caught up in all of that. And so that was the most helpful lesson for me, I think. And we were going through the 500 Startups accelerator at the time, and it was what I needed at the moment to just like give me sort of just like a boot camp in having a startup and raising a seed round, and I just kind of like executed on that. But my biggest takeaway from that I find myself repeating to people now is that I stopped thinking of those investor interactions or those first meetings as occasions where like they were vetting me and rather that I was vetting them, and that changed everything. And they appreciated that because it's like we're people.
And I always say you should do due diligence on the investors.
Yeah.
Like if they are interested, you should always ask other entrepreneurs, and they like it because they're like you're looking into them, you're like figuring out if this
Right.
is a
Yeah,
fit.
you should get references for them too.
You
It's like
should definitely get references.
it's like a first aid basically.
Yeah.
I think two other points just for like anyone who is looking to raise investment. This is something you already mentioned, but I just want to like amplify it even more. Like, don't raise investment for 9 months or something like that. That's terrible. Like it can drag on for quite a long time. Instead, put a time window to it. Just say it's going to be a month or whatever amount of time you think is reasonable. And the second thing is get a good lawyer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The second one, not everyone does. Like they
Actually,
just forget about that point.
My grandpa, I'm a 4th generation venture capitalist, so my great-grandpa, my grandpa, and my dad were all VCs. And so my grandpa, he said he always says, if you're starting a company, get a good lawyer.
Yeah.
That's like the first thing that you should do. And I don't think you really know how important it is until like 2 years later, but yeah, especially with startup law. Like, make sure they understand the startup law, like for fundraisings, for all those things. Otherwise, it just kills you later.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like we pay our lawyers like a lot of money, and so it's so funny because it's like, well, we haven't had any problems yet. I guess that's why we're paying them.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed, knock on wood.
He's at 2 years out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I would just add to that really briefly. I think lawyers, you got to have them. They have to be amazing. We love ours. I think we've also.
I mean, like everyone should have. I don't know. Like sometimes I'm frustrated with lawyers in general, but I do have a great lawyer, so
yeah.
I'm happy.
But I think there are also a lot of resources out there. To be honest, I mean, if you're looking, most startups go through the exact same thing over and over again, and if you're trying to I don't know, raise a very standard seed round, or raise a very standard convertible note, or raise a very standard, or incorporate very standardly, I think you can actually get a lot of the work done yourself, and then just like run it by the lawyer for as little time as possible, and you take it back, and you can like really, really small amounts of initiative and just desire to understand, even as a entrepreneur who has no clue, it makes a huge difference, because there are a lot of resources that are out there that are available to help. So our convertible note was just pretty much completely standard paperwork that we found online and ran by our lawyer.
Oh yeah,
that was cool.
There's you can download all the docs for up to like Series C now. Yeah. I mean, Uber did a convertible note round at $80 billion, so you know it's good. Do you feel your relative youth has been an advantage or disadvantage when dealing with potential investors? I actually think this relates to me more than you guys, because I've had to raise money, and running a fund is I don't know. I feel like youth is like what we expect from startup founders. Not all the time, but mostly.
I think it's kind of messed up, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the median age of entrepreneurship in the United States, we're not representative of that.
Oh, definitely not.
So it's kind of weird that Silicon Valley has had that obsession.
Yeah.
If that's the right word to put on it with youth, I think that it's not obviously it's been to all of our advantage, so we can't rail against it too much. But at the same time, it is a little strange. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I feel like in Silicon Valley it's an advantage though.
Well, we're enterprise B2B technology enabled healthcare system services, so probably youth not so much of an advantage for us.
That's a good point, for medical especially.
For medical, for health systems, for enterprise, for
financial
services. Yeah. So I think definitely actually it's been something that we've had to be aware of, but actually it hasn't benefited us. I think we've had to really bring really strong advisors, really strong mentors around the table. And I think what we brought was the energy and the kind of vision and creativity and hunger and all of those things, but you still have to have the ability to execute. And so the ideal in my mind would be like incredibly scrappy, hungry, brilliant founder surrounded by like a pantheon of like seasoned industry executives.
Seasoned
right.
veterans.
I imagine that would be perfect for VC. And so I think we really pursued that model of just surrounding ourselves with people who are just incredible and experienced and had done exactly what we wanted to do in their field 3 times before. And that was how we actually overcame that, because it was a barrier for us.
Yeah.
And I think what you just described is an advantage, even in a culture that's arguably youth obsessed, where you're not at a disadvantage being, in your 20s, raising rounds of financing, but like fundamentally you can't possibly know all the things that you need to know. And so, yeah.
It's like you're assuming they're gonna learn.
As
an investor, you're like, okay, you seem smart enough.
Or that you'll be that value add where it's like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to this person and this person who you should know, because they'll
and that's
bring you
probably
up to
why
speed.
you found such great investors, is like they were able to balance you and bring that knowledge. That's great.
I think takes feedback well is a very important kind of checkbox that a lot of investors have. It's important that young entrepreneurs, more than anything else, meet. I mean, if you're a seasoned industry vet and you're like, I got it, it's different. But for us, I think that's an important kind of gut check thing for both sides.
I agree. That's actually the one common trait I think that I have across all my huge companies that are just absolutely crushing it, is that they all receive feedback well, but they didn't always take the feedback. So it's like they did listen to it, they discussed it, and then they came out the other side whether they liked it or not. But it was like they really were. It's this ability to listen, not only hear but listen. Like I find that to be like a very captivating thing. That's a good way of doing it. Can we test DoorDash's speed by ordering sushi for the room? If you pick up the tab,
It's
whoever.
already here.
Look at the pictures, everybody.
That's already here. How much longer are we going? We 35? 25 more minutes. Okay, so we got a lifetime of things to discuss. Okay, how did you balance starting a business with continuing education in college? I think some people dropped out. So
Yeah, I didn't.
okay,
I did not.
balance them.
That's my answer. I'm done.
didn't balance it.
I did not drop out. So I started DoorDash my junior year, so there was a year and a half overlap. I mean, technically, I was still in school when Sequoia led our Series A. So they wrote us a $17 million check, and I was still in school. So I remember signing the term sheet that night and going back, and I still had to finish my CS homework.
Were you at least?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it didn't really.
So
for
do
me,
you-
like, I feel like you should only drop out of school like I don't think you should drop out of school like if you don't know what you're doing, right? You should just drop out and say, oh, I'm gonna do a startup. But it should be like pretty obvious that, okay, like this is working, like it has traction, and the only way for this to work out is if you drop out of school.
I mean, it's kind of what we did was what you say not to do. So I think that I definitely think it's possible to do that. Again, it's like that's definitely the optimal case. Is you already have traction, everything's going just amazing, and you're signing your term sheet in your dorm room for $17 million. But like, let's be real, that's not everyone's reality.
And most universities have like a 5-year policy or something.
Yeah,
like
no, I
that,
mean,
or
like,
at least.
I went on a leave of absence, and like, I think I could still go back, maybe.
You can.
I-
Brown
maybe-
has,
yeah,
Brown
exactly,
has
it's like-
resumed undergraduate education. You
There
can
you
go
go.
back when you're like 65.
Perfect.
Don't even worry about
That's
it.
what
There you
Troy.
go.
That's what Troy Aikman did at UCLA. I graduated 4 years after I was supposed to. So it's still, hey, you can do it.
So I was actually around 4 months from graduating with a medical degree from Stanford. Also, I was about 6 months from going to attend Harvard Business School. And that was actually right around when I was like, screw it. So I actually ended up going on we were trying to close our seed round, and we didn't think we would be able to do it with one of the two co-founders still in school, given how kind of massive the project was that we were undertaking. And so I actually ended up going on leave really painfully close to being able to call myself a doctor. But it was the right time. I think we had the traction we needed. We had the investor interest, and we were building the team, and we had the customer interest. And for me, it was very much like, oh, let's just kind of go on leave, and Stanford's great about that. And maybe I'll just say it's 1 quarter, and then that becomes a semester, and that becomes a year, and that became 2 years. And I think I'm on like 3.5 now. And they're just still like, okay, like let us know. So hopefully that keeps going. Yeah.
And what has been your biggest challenge? Actually, I asked the same. I'm going to rephrase it. But how has your job changed over the course of founding your company? Like your position as whether founder, CEO, whatever. Has it changed at all?
Yeah, for me, I think I gone through the biggest change. We're almost 200 people now, and it's just like totally different, right? Like early on, you're like in the weeds, you're like coding, you're like doing deliveries, you're doing customer support, like you're selling restaurants, like you were like doing like everything, right? And then and your role sort of changes from being just an individual contributor to over time focusing on building teams, right? Empowering others to do great work, and so I think that has been the biggest change, right? It's early on it was focused more on like you're building stuff, and later on you're focused more on team building, like scaling the organization. You don't spend as much time necessarily on the product or the like coding, but maybe more around how do you build great processes to enable others to collaborate, or what's a good product process, how does like the ops team collaborate with the engineering team. So you're focusing more on these like people organizational problems, right? So that's been the biggest shift for me, and I'm still getting used to that. And now like a lot of what I do is also focusing on, hiring like what the leadership team might look like eventually. So you're even more removed, right? So that's sort of been a change for me.
So on a meta level, it's almost like you've gone from programming the actual application to programming the organization.
Yeah. For sure.
Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. I like that. Okay. Okay. So I'm sure a lot of you have, over the course of your time, like brought on, considered people mentors or advisors or something like that. What have you done? How do you approach that? Like, how do you find a mentor or an advisor? Or is it natural or is it not natural? I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I do it. I'm not even sure how it's normal conversation, and then I reach out to them every once in a while. I'm like, yo, need your help. Yeah. Do you guys have people you consider mentors? And
Yeah, I think it helps if there are a couple of people who can kind of seed that network for you, and you only find those people through, networking or life or whatever it may be. So in our case, like the CEO of the Public Radio Exchange was someone who we ended up partnering with to build technology very early on. But even back when we were still in grad school, we were doing, kind of surveying the ecosystem of radio distribution and audio, the way audio is organized, and we reached out to their staff and were talking with them, and then shared our master's thesis with them, and so that was a very natural progression towards what then became a partnership with them and very close relationship with the whole organization. But that person, or another example of this would be like Roy Bahat, who's one of the leads at Bloomberg Beta, one of our investors. And these he actually taught a course at Berkeley at the high school when we were in graduate school. So that relationship started there, and then grew into this investor mentor relationship. But those are just two examples of people who know me and know us well enough at this point to be able to say, and have said over the years, like, oh, who else you should talk to is, and then it's just this network effect of people getting to know you in a capacity where they can then introduce you to the 2 or 3 other people who would be worth you knowing. And in my experience, at least, it's sort of dominant from there. And there are some people who you meet with and never talk to again by your choice or theirs. There are some people who you talk to more sporadically than others, but that's how that kind of mentor network has cropped up for me, at least.
cool. Do you guys have any mentors or advisors?
Well, one of the things that I guess I've heard a lot from talking to friends is the question of like, why would a mentor want to talk to you, right? Like, ideally a mentor is someone who's much more successful, much more knowledgeable, much better in the area that you want to be better at than you are, and why would they spend time on you? And I think it's that was something that I kind of questioned as well. You mentioned an investor mentor or a customer mentor or mentors who crop up in the course of you building your business, and I think oftentimes mentors are people who just believe in your company and want to help you, and that's something that I didn't really fully appreciate, but that's actually where most of our guidance and most of our mentorship and some of our hires actually came from, was people who just believed in the company and believed in us as individuals. So I guess like that was where a lot of our mentors came from. I think another arena is like, mentors are just people who haven't found a way to work for you or by you yet. It's kind of like ultimately I think where a lot of the connections have been made.
And there was a question in the audience that was how, which I get a lot in general, which is how did you guys decide to take the plunge to go full time into starting your company? Like, what's the balance? Was it like you raised money, like, and suddenly you were like, oh, I have money now, I can take the plunge, or were you like you decided to go full time because it seemed like a cool thing? You didn't like school? I don't know. What were your reasons for actually taking the full plunge? I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, they try to straddle, they try to like mitigate their risk, sort of like this. So they're like, well, I'm in school and I'm also starting the business and like all that stuff, and I don't know, it doesn't work all the time. It worked for a couple of you, but DoorDash, it worked for you. But do you guys have any thoughts on like what's the distinction between like an idea you shouldn't go for and an idea that you should go for?
I don't know that you can that there's kind of rhyme and reason around like identifying an idea you should go for or shouldn't go for, but I do think that this actually ties into the mentor question nicely. Like, what made us decide to take the plunge and just take those risks and go for it was meeting with a guy who we had reached out to, who was starting a thing that at the time was called the Public Media Accelerator, but its goal was to change media for good, and they were going to raise a fund, and they exist now. It's called Matter.vc, and they've like run a few small accelerator classes. Yeah, and so we went to meet with Corey Ford, and we like got froyo in Palo Alto, which was weird, but I was like, I can't eat this froyo. This is so distracting. But his advice, the advice he gave us then that we very much took to heart was, if this is really something that you think you want to give a chance to, you should be doing it full time. Like Bailey shouldn't be working 3 days a week at Pivotal Labs. You shouldn't be working, other jobs. You guys should just go for it. And maybe it won't work, and maybe it will. And that was really good advice.
Agree.
And then in our case, we didn't go for raising a seed round right away because we were still figuring all kinds of stuff out. But we, just like wrote off this application to the Knight Foundation. And weeks later, which is one of the great things about them, we had $300,000. And we were like, okay, now what do we do? But like, hey, it's okay that we don't have jobs. We'll figure this out.
Yeah. I always say, like, how can I bet on you if you're not betting on yourself, sort of thing. That's the general, that's the advice I give. Because if you're expecting to actually raise money, I mean, maybe you figure out how to be a profitable company and go to school and, like, have friends also and, like, all those things, which I say the first 2.5 years, you have to sacrifice a lot of things, and then you need to pace yourself for a marathon. And like, or that's what I sort of feel, because you're able to build a brand, you're able to build those things in 2.5 years. And I had, like when I was starting Boost VC, I had to sacrifice, not hanging out with my friends. I had to sacrifice not seeing my family as much as I probably should, or calling them at all. And then like, those things add up. And then there's all this like social debt that you have to deal with later. But in general, like if you love it, if you're passionate about it, if you think you can do it, like you need to take the bet on yourself. So that's my thesis. But yeah.
I mean, I love school, but I was at an internship at Flipboard for 6 months, and simultaneously was applying to the Thiel Fellowship. And in the process of applying, we were prototyping different ideas out, and just working with Evan, my co-founder, it was so fun. It was the most fun I'd ever had, just like on nights and weekends. And so we decided before there's a finalist round at that point, and before that even happened, we decided like we're gonna go all in. Don't really know how we're gonna eat yet, but like we'll figure it out somehow. I had some savings. I knew that we had a few months at least that we could try. I thought it'd just be fun, and worst comes to worst, I go back to school, and he goes and gets a job, and then the Thiel Fellowship came through. So we also had that luck as well.
Yeah, we provide ramen and Red Bull.
Yeah, there you go.
So
the two startup staples.
Yeah, the two startup staples. We've actually considered replacing Red Bull with Soylent.
Don't do that.
Don't do it.
Actually, our entire team.
I tried it, man. It's terrible.
Our entire team's on a Soylent kick. Like we've actually replaced our lunches with Soylent. It's an efficiency thing.
Okay.
So I think of it as like, instead of going out for 40 minutes to lunch you could go with someone, but instead I can stay at my desk, drink.
Forget about
Soylent.
talking to people.
Yeah, instead of doing that, which sounds just horrible, I can sit at my desk and be antisocial.
Or they can order
like,
DoorDash.
What?
Or they can order
That's
DoorDash.
true.
So I do. For the record, I do. It's either Soylent or DoorDash. Those are my two options right now. And or I walk to like, there are a couple good places in San Mateo. But so we're considering it. Red Bull is horrible for you. Okay, so replacing it with Soylent would be more like health for everyone is the general concept. So there like a couple more minutes. Does anyone in the audience have a question that they really want to ask more than those? Okay, we'll get 2 questions. Those were the first 2 hands that got raised. So him, then you. Is that okay? Him. Yeah. Oh, it's a question about balancing your life, right? I mean, it's like, how do you balance your life working 24 hours a day and then also family and friends and doing like exercise? Yeah, that sort of thing. Do you guys have an answer?
I recently had I think it was a like quadruple purpose trip. It was a recruiting trip for a hire we wanted made. It was a trip to visit a potential customer of ours. It was a trip to visit one of my family members, and it was a vacation and a like kind of a special occasion, like a anniversary in terms of dating for my significant other. And I managed to combine all those 5 occurrences into one trip that lasted like a long weekend. So stuff like that really helps.
That is a hard way. That's hard to plan. That is a hard thing. I'm impressed.
Yeah. So I think really being efficient about the time that you don't spend and making sure it's like you just like squeeze all the value out of it is kind of important.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, I agree
I do
with
think
that.
time off and like the ability to recognize when you really have to decompress and when you're like burning your head into a wall over and over again is really important. And I catch myself doing that sometimes, and you have to take some time off and like recognize that.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from my co-founder on this front because I was and am the one who would have more of a tendency to be like willing to just like run my head into the wall over and over again, and she came into this with a very clear kind of priorities and perspective off the bat. So like we have always taken the weekends off, and we don't work 24-hour days. And I think that's worth mentioning because I've seen a lot of, I'm going through 500 startups, I had this experience too. I mean, it's really easy to like be at the office 24 hours a day, but like there's a ton of time that gets wasted too, and you can't actually work efficiently and at your top capacity 24 hours out of every day. So, I think that company to company, it varies industry to industry, depending on like what opportunity you're chasing and what the timeline or the clock on that looks like. It's different. Like we, as we observe the shift of radio from broadcast to digital, and it's taking forever, we like have our own challenges around that, but also time, which has been a great gift, because otherwise, I mean, I think I would have absolutely burnt out if I had set the pace and not had Bailey to sort of like,
Yeah. So like I think the question was like when did you patent or when did you try to protect your ideas? I think you're asking about medical in particular, but I think we mentioned stealth startups before, and similarly, I think like patents as protection really, especially in technology and software now, like after the Alice lawsuit happened, like you can't really rely on patents for protection. I mean, any startup is going to succeed or fail based upon like how fast they execute, the quality of their service, the customer experience, the team they build. Those are the competitive advantages, not patents, not stealth. And I have never seen anything disagree with that.
I completely agree. But people come to me and they say, they actually say we filed a patent, and I look at them as if they just wasted a bunch of money that they could have spent on their company, especially if they haven't built the product or done anything. So, because patents are expensive too. It's like, it can get really, really, really expensive. You want to spend as little money on lawyers, but you want it to be good lawyers. So it's a tough balance.
I mean, it's hard to imagine outside of like the world that we're all in right now, I think, because I think all of us are probably pretty like laser focused on the company. But
I wrote my undergraduate thesis about Abraham Lincoln, and my next career is going to be
being Abraham Lincoln.
He's my hero. But no, I'm gonna turn it into a book for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I have like a million side projects that are like written down somewhere that I'd love to work on if that time ever came, but they like haven't been worked on. So it's like where things go to die, I guess.
Yeah, I think some of the great entrepreneurs always think in terms of like 30 years. Like they're going to be working, so like thinking beyond that right now is hard probably. But it's a good question, high schooler out there. So the question was, his last company went down in flames. He's wondering because he kept people around too long he shouldn't have kept on, and he had the wrong co-founder. How do you essentially stop that from happening? But how do you pick the right people? That's the question. Anyone have advice? Or
I mean, we just got really lucky. The first few hires we brought on were just phenomenal, and they sort of basically helped set the culture for the company, and they basically were the ones that helped us bring in the next sort of hires, right? And I mean, really, like our first few hires, they were just like our friends, you know.
That's not getting lucky, though.
I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like it's like we're lucky in the sense that, you know, like our first, I mean, not all your friends will agree to join you on this journey, right? Like the fact that they were willing to help out, and some were friends of friends, right? And they sort of set the tone for us. And so I think the early few hires are really important, right? Because you have to understand those are the guys who are actually going to bring on the next set of people.
I would say you want to take your time to find the right person. You're not going to find them you're not going to find them overnight, and you want to just test out that relationship. It's a lot like dating in a lot of ways, where you're literally just trying to find if this is a long-term thing. Does this person feel the same way about me? Like, you should be feeling out that whole relationship.
So I actually have an example, right? So our employee number one, he's a friend of a friend, and it took us, so I think we first got connected in March. This is actually when we're still doing like the whole Palo delivery thing, right? Like a side project, and it took us like 7 months to get him, right? Like he joined us in December that year. So it was like a really long process before we hired our first employee, and now he's like one of the leaders of the company. He's a culture carrier at the company for us.
I think in terms of your original question, like how do you hire the right people, or maybe fire at the right times, or how do you judge? I think you can't. There's no one answer to that. I mean, it's a highly specific answer for every single company, and it relates to culture and the values that you have. So you have to be very specific about like what is your culture of the company, what do you want it to be, you know, and as you hire people and you build momentum around that culture and the values that you share, then you have to keep it consistent and make sure that you're holding yourselves accountable to it. So I think it's something that you have to like introspect into rather than there being one answer to.
Yeah, and if someone's not rowing the boat forward, they're rowing the boat backward. So you just need to get rid of them fast. Hire slow, fire fast. I mean, it feels like everyone's projects are working up here. So
I mean,
I would not change a thing. You know?
I do have one. I mean, honestly, like we've been so lucky. Like everything's gone really smoothly for us. There's one thing is I would have raised less money in our seed round.
Yeah.
Why?
That's such a common.
I would have. We raised 2.4 million, and by the time we raised our Series A, we still had like 1.8 in the bank. You know, that's like a huge dilution hit.
Yeah. That's a common occurrence. So some people, it's the reverse reason, but it's like they.
I mean, hindsight's always
Yeah.
20/20. Right? Like you don't know how long that money's gonna last, but
Yeah.
obviously, looking back, it's very easy to say, oh, we could have gone away with just raising 1 million, but
Yeah.
But honestly, like you can't really predict these things, right? It's gone pretty
It's
well
funny.
for
Other
us.
founders have said I wouldn't have been so worried about being diluted. So,
Exactly, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first thing I would do would be find a co-founder that is aligned with what I'm trying to do, which I did at Boost VC. But I still think that would be the first thing I would think to do. I don't know about you guys. Like, you want something that you can talk to someone about. Otherwise, you're alone in your basement, either coding or not coding.
Going back, like if the question is going back, you know, to the start of the company, time traveling, and then like changing a variable and you know propagating forward, and something somehow we're really like things are going a lot better. I think one thing that we could have done, which is sort of like something that I've heard before from other people but never applied, is when we went to finally launch and we spent all this time building this tech, we did all this work to figure out, okay, what's our positioning in the market? Like, what are our differentiators? How are we going to market this thing? And I think that if we'd done that work up front, there are certain things that we never would have taken on that ended up taking quite a long time, and we could have launched sooner.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Just really briefly, I think one of the things, at least if you're trying to penetrate an industry that's difficult to penetrate, enterprise or healthcare or whatever it is, I think we've really, it's taken us a while to really learn kind of what customers are willing to tolerate, what type of terms, kind of what type of business model, what type of structure that they want to see. And there are some things that we thought they would just absolutely just say no to that they're completely used to from the market. And there are some things that we thought would be just really easy that they just would absolutely refuse. And it would be things like indemnification, like really obscure things that were like, this is a huge liability for us, we can't do this. And we would argue about it for like 3 months, and then eventually we would just cave. And other things which, yeah, please pay for, like X amount of time up front. And we're like, oh my God, that's a huge check. How would they ever agree to that? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so I think and I'm still learning, I'm still constantly shocked, but I actually think I would, whatever this company is that I did, I would really understand the customer even better. I would try to find the contracts that they typically sign, like what the terms are, and really just dive deep into what they expect versus kind of what I think I would get away with. I think our contract terms and kind of our relationships and expectations setting would have just gone, we would have been skip a few stages of evolution of our company if we managed to do that. So that's, know your customer, I guess.
Well, give our panelists one of these round of applause.